Greetings, brothers and sisters. Shalom. Assalamu alaikum. Adnastana. It's a pleasure to be back with you here on Points of Light Radio and continuing our journey of light and knowledge. I just finished a workout in the basement of my house here. And in today's segment of Points of Light Radio, we are going to be fellowshipping with a gentleman named Austin Shifrin. Mr. Shifrin is a member of the Force number 160 Tall Cedars of Lebanon in Pittsburg, Pennsylvania. Now, I have wanted to feature the Tall Cedars of Lebanon here on Points of Light Radio almost from the day the podcast began. So we're going to be doing that. I'm going to grab a quick shower here, and then we will move on to that interview.
Ladies and gentlemen, seekers of light and secret knowledge wherever you may be, you are listening to Points of Light Radio, the podcast dedicated to taking you past the apron and behind the closed doors of lodges everywhere. And here is your host, Stan Miller.
Mr. Shifrin,
hello.
Welcome to Points of Light Radio.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yes, and I understand that you are a member of Force number 160, Tall Cedars of Lebanon.
This is true. Among a pile of other fine organizations, I am a member of Tall Cedars.
Music to my ears. So, first of all, why don't you tell my listeners and viewers about yourself?
Well, let's see. I guess I could give you a mix of different background, my ordinary world as well as my Masonic stuff, as it were. I grew up in New York City, but I've been living in Pittsburgh since 1993. I came here to study at Carnegie Mellon University, and I started having just too much fun in Pittsburgh, and I never left. Stuck around, did graduate work, went on to the work world, and stayed and lived here in Pittsburgh and really put down roots. My grandfather had been a Mason in New York, but honestly, like some other brothers that you will encounter have similar life stories, he and I had not gotten to discuss it in depth, and I did not join up younger. Instead, for me, I took a circuitous route back to Freemasonry when I was about 31. I had a dear friend living in the South Side who happened to be a member, and we fell into conversation about it. And I explained to him that when I was younger, I had been curious about this, but the communication with my grandfather had not really happened. And this friend of mine, Eric, sort of provided me entree into this world of Freemasonry, which I've been very grateful to be involved with now since 2006. I've been a member of Blue Lodge. Pretty early on, I also joined the Scottish Rite. A little farther down the road, I joined both the York Rite and the Shrine. Eventually wound up involved also with Tall Cedars, Operatives, Ethelstan. I imagine I might be leaving something out in that quick overview, but a few years into my Scottish Rite involvement, I guess I should say about 8 years in, I was involved as an officer. And in our Scottish Rite Valley here in Pittsburgh, they asked the presiding officers of each of the lines to write for our local magazine. And I kind of rediscovered a love of writing. I eventually wound out collecting several of my articles, as well as a history presentation, together in a publication called More Light, which I put out back in 2022. Spent the following 2 years doing a fair amount of traveling, presenting to a number of different Blue Lodges, as well as some Scottish Rite Valleys, some York Rite bodies. And then a year ago, put out my second book called Black Ink, Farther Stars. And yeah, it's just been quite a journey. It's been a exciting and enriching journey, and I'm grateful for all of it.
Well, that's fraternalism, I think, in general.
I
really.
have to agree.
I mean, it is, especially with these esoteric organizations, it is a journey, that we take. And I think you'll agree with me, it is part, your experience there with your grandpa was kind of indicative of the problems I think that has existed in fraternalism. I'm not saying that we should force our kids or whatever into it, but I think it is something that we should at least offer it to them, let them know that it is there. I know very early on, I made my kids aware of what I was doing. I have taken my son's never joined, but I have taken him to the lodge, let him meet the lads, shall we say, and I think we do need to do that at least. I'm not saying put it there for them. Let them know. Like I know, even like I was in the military. I was in the military with guys whose dads literally drove them down to the recruiting center and stood there while they joined. Sign that thing.
Yep.
I never did that, but I did the same thing with my time in the military. I put it in front of my kids as an option. We need to start, at least putting these fraternal orders we belong to in front of our kids, letting them see them, letting them know that they're there for them should they want something to do or want to be involved in something.
Yeah, and I've been given the opportunity to tell this story of my entree into Freemasonry on a few occasions. So I did not necessarily want to retread too much ground that I've covered thoroughly, but I will say that in this instance with my grandfather, it was less a situation of him deliberately leaving me in the dark and more, an odd miscommunication where when I expressed my interest to him, he said, well, you're about to go away to college and Freemasonry at its roots is a fraternity. Why don't you go see what fraternity life is like? And if that's something that interests you, then we can discuss it some more. And I think in him expressing it that way to me, he might not have been aware of how much fraternities had changed on the American college campus in the 60 years since he had been in school, and so there was just kind of crossed wires there, as it were. But
the British actually have on universities, they do have Masonic clubs and lodges.
I have heard of this, and I think it makes a ton of sense too. But I think the odd thing is in the number of different Masons that I've spoken to, there are trends in terms of the communication that they got, in connection with male relatives when they were younger, and it tends to go in one of two very different directions. Either when they were younger, they had plenty of exposure to their dads and their uncles and their grandparents who were involved in the fraternity, and they saw the dynamic that those men had with their fraternal brothers and became very interested in joining it as soon as they could, when they were young, versus fellas who their elder male relatives were very secretive about the fraternity, and so they never really found out anything, or might not have even known that their father or uncle was a member until maybe they passed away and there was a Masonic funeral, and it was just caught them completely by surprise. So you do tend to see people falling into these categories almost.
Oh, for sure. Now, tell us about the Tall Cedars of Lebanon.
Absolutely. So without divulging anything that might be inappropriate to the general public, what I can very safely say is that the Tall Cedars of Lebanon are what we tend to refer to as an appendant body in Freemasonry. It means that you need to be a member of a regular or Blue Lodge, as we often refer to it, before you can join. And the Tall Cedars, on some level, has more of a focus on fun and frolic, as it were, than serious symbolic or esoteric or self-improvement lessons. Their focus is more on fellowship and recreation. And the storyline that they derive their initiation ritual from still relates back to the same Old Testament stories at the era of King Solomon and the construction of the first temple, but with a little bit more emphasis on the timber that was needed for the undertaking of this project and Solomon's reliance on their geographical neighbor, in Lebanon, to supply some of this material.
Okay, now when you say fun and frolic, what exactly is now? There are other Masonic bodies for that, like the grotto, the shrine, even the Psyots.
Absolutely.
But what exactly are the Tall Cedars doing that those bodies aren't doing?
No, I think it's more realistic to say that they there's a lot of overlap in terms of the nature and the focus, right? So it's more about can the members find activities to just enjoy recreation and fellowship together. Will we be making trips out to ball games or dinner theater or what have you? So it has a lot of that common territory with the shrine, with Grotto. They do have their own distinct and separate charitable focus, as so many of these Masonic bodies do. They focus their fundraising on research for cures and treatments for muscular dystrophy. But yeah, I mean, I know that you're recognizing some similarities there, and you're not off base at all.
No, but there again, what do you do to raise money for muscular dystrophy? What do you exactly?
This particular forest has done a variety of different activities. They have a annual dinner that seems to be their most successful, and I know that might sound like well-trodden territory, but honestly, their annual dinner has been very successful, thanks in no small part to the dedicated efforts of the members. They put on a nice event, and they are very dogged and determined about selling tickets, and it's been very effective year after year.
Okay. And okay, so even in Freemasonry, when it comes time, like I was going to ask you here, so are there degrees to the Tall Cedars of Lebanon, or is it just one degree you get in?
Right. In Tall Cedars, there's really only the one degree as a member of that forest. Having said that, I think one of the interesting challenges here is that I have not yet encountered a lot of forests where they have a full degree team put together. And I think this is one of those situations where, some years back, somebody produced a DVD video of the degree work for the benefit, and this was not, somebody, like when I say somebody, not somebody off the street.
Yeah.
One of the grand tall, sorry, the grand body, the national body at the time produced a video of the degree work. And I think a lot of the forests have sort of leaned on that as a crutch
Got
for
lazy.
a little while to deliver the degree. And, I can understand and respect how that dynamic accidentally unfolds, because if you have that crutch in place and people come to rely upon it, there's less motivation for people to step up and say, hey, you know what? We want to put those training wheels aside, and we want to put together a cast and do the degree
Very
work.
true.
I would say that in my perception, having been to, joined quite a variety of these bodies, I'd say it's very beautiful degree work, and I'd love to see it put on, with a full cast live, anytime in the near future that I could. But there is only, I'm sorry, that might have been a roundabout answer to your question.
That's fine. No, I love it.
There is only the one degree.
Now, are there plans to expand, shall we say, the Tall Cedars into places like Canada or anywhere else in the world? Because I know they don't exist in Canada. I don't think they exist in the UK either.
You know what? Unfortunately, I might be a little underinformed in that regard, so I don't know more about the overarching plans at a national level. I apologize. I'm a little embarrassed.
No, that's fine.
Because
but
I do get the
you're not
magazine.
aware of any. Put it that way.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
Now, and I've heard it said that from Freemasons that you learn a lot about yourself as you go through the degree system. So did you learn even a little more about yourself as you went through the Tall Cedars?
Yeah, I feel like I did, and it might be a little challenging to articulate, but I know that um, I came to the Tall Cedars after I had had experience in some other bodies, both as a member and in leadership positions, and it was nice to dust off some of these lessons and be reminded, I still have. It was nice to come someplace and realize that I still had something to offer. I didn't feel like a has been, right. I was, I could step in as somebody who was of value to this branch, and they said, hey, if you have, if you're willing to step up and offer and assist to help things function, to help things run, we've got a place for you. And that was certainly a good feeling.
So now I know that some places, like for instance, the Muscovites have separated from the Oddfellows and things like that. Are you saying that the work you did in the Blue Lodge was actually necessary before advancing into the Cedars? Would you agree with that?
I can't say for you 100% whether I feel that it was necessary. I definitely feel like it was an asset, right? Because number one, I will say I don't ever foresee Tall Cedars fracturing off away from Freemasonry. Thought number one. Thought number two, because Tall Cedars organizational structure clearly mimics Masonic organizational structure. If you've come up through a progressive line of chairs in a Blue Lodge and you've seen officers do floor work and you understand minutes and you understand some of these structural aspects, then you're showing up in Tall Cedars, you've got all of the orientation that you need. You know what I mean?
So what is your membership in these different Masonic bodies? What exactly has it done for you?
Well, it's done two things. I mean, for one thing, it's given, as a person who grew up Jewish, it's given me an enhanced additional appreciation going back to all of these Old Testament stories, things that I might have read when I was little, and I had one perspective on, but maybe not as much appreciation for. And you come back to these stories as an adult, put in a different framework, in a different context, and you're like, oh, like, maybe part of what makes it hard to relate to is you're talking about the dramatic stories of, the lives of adults.
Mm-hmm.
And, as a kid, you may or may not have the same level of appreciation. And then you come at these stories and somebody says, look, here's a story about loyalty. Here's a story about danger. Here's a story about friendship. Here's a story about, romantic relationships, wars, conflicts, resolutions. And as an adult, you have a new and completely different appreciation for these things. And I'm grateful to Freemasonry for taking material that I had seen as a youth and presenting it to me in a very different light. I think that the most interesting thing about moving through bodies and exploring different degrees is a combination of the new lessons that you encounter and the old lessons that you get reinforced. I've certainly heard enough jokes in my time about the Scottish Rite having 32 degrees or me being a 33rd and people being like, what, you didn't get it after the first three? And like, I see the humor in that. Yeah. Because I think there's, plenty of merit in saying, look, you get a lot of content and, maybe, a lot of important lessons in the 3 degrees that you get in Blue Lodge. There is no argument to be made that a person who goes through the Scottish Rite is in some way, quote unquote, better than a man who goes through his 3 degrees in the Blue Lodge and stops. But by the same token, I think that there's interesting enhancement and augmenting material that you pick up along the way that I'm glad to have not missed out on.
Well, Mr. Shifrin, I appreciate your time today. We're definitely going to have you back here to collaborate on some other projects, but all the best to you and to your force, sir.
Well, brother, thank you for your time. I certainly hope it turns out to be of interest to your listeners. And if you're willing to have me back, I'd be delighted.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice day. Austin Shifrin, brothers and sisters, shedding some light on the tall cedars of Lebanon. That was not just a interview, that was a conversation. I love that. Just people coming on here and just opening up, just talking. I mean, right? I love that. But how do you feel about what you saw today? On a personal level, I can't tell you how good it feels to finally cover the Tall Cedars of Lebanon, because as I told you in the introduction, it's been like 3 years I've been trying to feature the Tall Cedars. There's just something about, featuring an organization that we've been chasing that long. That's wonderful, right? And there again, it just reinforces something I say about Freemasonry. It is not something you can get bored in. It really isn't. And there's so much to learn, these side degrees and appendant bodies here and there. It's beautiful, right? But, during my research for the Tall Cedars of Lebanon, what I learned is this is an organization that is growing and wants to grow. I went on their website there, and there's a link for membership, but there's also they also offer the opportunity to be a member at large, right? And you've heard me talk about this sort of thing. How do we grow our organizations? How do we spread them out? How do we modernize fraternalism? This is an organization that is doing it. And, there's even more. They also have a link on there of how to start a forest, right? You can hit on that. They'll give you some forms and show you, and instruct you on how to move forward from there. They'll be there to help you out. And this is, like I keep saying, this is about moving fraternalism forward. I love it. And, the Tall Cedars are doing just that. And we will definitely have to have Mr. Shifrin back here on Points of Light Radio to talk more about his literary works, as well as some of the other organizations, like the fraternal bodies and Masonic bodies that he belongs to. But that's all I have time for today. I do have to go interview a candidate in my lodge when I'm done here, so I've got to move forward. But before I go, I want to remind you that Points of Light Radio is available on both YouTube and Spreaker. Please share, like, and subscribe when viewing Points of Light Radio on YouTube. I also welcome your comments and input. You can see the link to my PayPal account there, where you can hit on that link, make a voluntary donation to the podcast. We will use that to move Points of Light Radio forward. You can see the link to my Facebook page at facebook.com/Points of Light Radio. You can see that my Twitter handle is at PO Light Radio, or is that X these days? I don't know. But we've even got more modern. My daughter showed me Bluesky, and my Bluesky handle is at polightradio.bsky.social. You can see the link to my Spotify channel, as well as my Points of Light Radio store. Brothers and sisters, it's been wonderful breaking new ground here on Points of Light Radio, and featuring a new guest and organization. Until we meet again, just step into the light.